It was meant to be a grandiose spectacle, a showcase of Russia's naval might, an opportunity for Vladimir Putin to project power under the guise of celebrating his country's many ships and submarines. But now it's no more. Russia has cancelled its naval parade after humiliating Black Sea losses that have shaken the country's navy to its very core. Ironically, this lack of display means that Russia's naval decline is on full display, leaving Putin with yet more egg on his face in a war that simply won't go his way. Ever since July 2017, the Russian Navy has held a massive parade in St. Petersburg. Held on the last Sunday of each July, the parade is what you'd expect from something that Putin orders to satiate his massive military ego. It's all spectacle and show, designed to hide the many cracks in Russia's navy, which we'll go into later in the video. Still, it happens every year. Maritime Executive says that the parade is among Russia's largest and most well-publicized military events, likely meaning that footage of the show is beamed out to state-controlled news outlets and television stations throughout Russia. Normally, Putin would be sitting shoreside watching the spectacle with some of his top military brass, or in some cases, he'll take part in a VIP launch of a brand new ship. Something similar was likely in the works for the 2025 parade. Now, it isn't. Nothing is. Just hours before the parade was set to go ahead, Russia cancelled the festivities in what can only be interpreted as a fear-based response to how badly Ukraine has devastated Russia's navy since Putin launched his full-scale invasion. The navy personnel won't march. No new ships will sail. According to Pravda, an annual tradition that has often seen ships travel to St. Petersburg from all around Russia and in some cases elsewhere in the world, isn't going ahead. And surprisingly, Russia has admitted it. Sort of. On July 27th, the Moscow Times reported that officials in St. Petersburg announced the cancellation of the naval parade a couple of days earlier. Apparently, somebody in St. Petersburg jumped the gun. Within hours of the announcement being made, a retraction was issued. That's according to Russian news outlet Fontanka, which reported that the Russia's Transport Committee stated the information about the cancellation of the Navy Day parade had been posted in error. So the parade is still on? No, not at all. Just a couple of days after the Kremlin ordered a takedown of the cancellation notice issued by St. Petersburg authorities, it made the cancellation official. There will be no naval parade. The flotilla of warships and military vessels that are usually seen floating down the Neva River to mark the day's festivities would be nowhere to be seen. There's an obvious question: why? We have the Kremlin's answer. The Telegraph reports that Putin's mouthpiece, Dmitry Peskov, noted security as the main reason for the cancellation. The cancellation has to do with the general situation. Security reasons are of utmost importance, Peskov said in a statement. And he has something of a point. The last time Russia held a parade was on May 9th, when it celebrated Victory Day to mark the Soviet Union's role in overcoming the Nazi terror during World War II. Putin requested a ceasefire for the weekend of that parade after spending several months refusing to grant the 30-day total ceasefire that Ukraine and the US had negotiated in March. Ukraine didn't oblige. On May 7th, 2 days before the Victory Day parade took place, Ukraine launched a massive drone attack. According to the Telegraph, the Russian Defense Ministry claimed that it had shot down 524 drones during the assault. Ukraine didn't attack the Victory Day parade itself. They couldn't afford to. Putin had craftily invited the few world leaders who still support Russia's cause to the parade, including China's President Xi Jinping. Ukraine couldn't risk a direct attack on the parade for fear of killing or injuring one of these leaders, sparking a global crisis. Putin had his human shields, and the Victory Day parade went ahead. Fast forward to the eve of the Navy Day parade, and Ukraine was at it again. The Telegraph says that July 27th saw the Russian Defense Ministry claim that its air defense units had shot down 291 Ukrainian drones on the day the parade was supposed to take place. The ministry also says that a woman was injured in the Ukrainian strike in the Leningrad region surrounding St. Petersburg. The drone attack was also severe enough to force the closure of Pulkovo Airport, leading to 57 flights getting delayed and another 22 having to be diverted to other airports. But so what, you might say? Ukraine launched an even larger drone strike on the eve of the Victory Day parade, and that celebration still went ahead. Why wouldn't the Navy Day parade happen if Ukraine was following the same pattern? The answer is simple. Russia can't assume that Ukraine will follow the pattern. Ukraine didn't abide by Putin's request for a ceasefire during the Victory Day parade out of any sort of respect for Russia's leader. It didn't attack the parade for the reason we mentioned earlier. Putin had surrounded himself with a literal human shield of some of the most important world leaders who still support Russia. That wasn't going to be the case during the Navy Day parade. It would have been Putin, some of his military brass, and a whole lot of Russian soldiers and ships taking part in the parade. Ukraine wouldn't have needed to worry about the likes of President Xi or any of the other world leaders being collateral damage in a strike against this parade. If anything, the parade would have offered an opportunity to take out Putin himself while he participated in an ego-driven voyage on one of Russia's ships. Putin still did a tour, He arrived at St. Petersburg naval headquarters via a speedboat rather than one of Russia's larger military ships. That was a tactical move. Much harder to hit a small speedboat with a long-range drone or missile than it is to hit a massive warship. But when he arrived in St. Petersburg, Putin hid himself away deep in the naval headquarters, where he tracked several Russian naval drills taking place in the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, as well as drills in the Baltic and Caspian Seas, the Telegraph reports. Those drills included 150 ships and 15,000 military personnel. These are all ships and people that were a long way from St. Petersburg. Putin tried to act like it was all part of the plan. In a video addressed to the nation, he said, "Today we are marking this holiday in a working setting. We are inspecting the combat readiness of the fleet." However, Peskov's words have betrayed Putin's fear. The reason no ship sailed in St. Petersburg is that Russia was terrified that Ukraine would launch a long-range strike that would take out some of those ships, leaving Putin humiliated. After all, the Navy Day parade is beamed to millions of homes in Russia via television. Imagine how big a dent Ukraine could have left in Putin's self-made image as Russia's only protector if those television cameras recorded footage of Putin doing little more than watching as one of his Navy's ships was scuttled. So security was a legitimate concern for Russia. But it's not the only reason why Russia's grand naval celebrations were cancelled. The second reason is something that Putin will never want to admit. The parade didn't go ahead because Ukraine has done an amazing job of devastating the parts of the Russian Navy that are supposed to be helping Putin complete his invasion. That's according to Euromaidan Press, which suggests that it's no coincidence that the cancellation comes on the back of Ukraine having destroyed an estimated 33% of the combat ships Russia deployed in the Black Sea. Those ships were part of the once dreaded Black Sea Fleet, and 24 of them are now damaged or destroyed thanks to Ukraine's drones and missiles. Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation suggests the same thing, stating, "The Kremlin can no longer pretend that the war does not affect the Russian rear. The war impacts all spheres of life in Russia, even symbolic and loud events like the naval parade." The tale of the Black Sea Fleet between 2022 and today is one of abject failure. When Putin first invaded Ukraine, he believed that he would be able to rely on the dreaded fleet to control the Black Sea. And with that control would come the ability to prevent Ukraine from exporting its grain. Before Putin launched his invasion, Ukraine shipped around 60 million tons of grain annually, accounting for about 10% of the global market, the Council on Foreign Relations says. That grain would provide an economic lifeline for Ukraine, which is why Putin wanted to prevent his enemy from shipping it. Beyond that, control over the Black Sea would allow Russia free rein to send troops and supplies into southern Ukraine to support Russia's ground invasion. For a short while, the Black Sea Fleet did what it was supposed to do, but Ukraine wasn't going to let Putin have his way in the Black Sea. Ukraine didn't really have a navy to speak of. The Conversation points this out in a July 2024 article, as Ukraine's patrol ships couldn't match the might of Russia's warships in the Black Sea. But they didn't need to. Rather than engaging in ship-to-ship combat, Ukraine innovated, as it has so many times during the war. Ukraine's first target was the guided missile cruiser Moskva. Often hailed as the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the Moskva had spent much of the early part of the war raining missiles down on Ukraine, as well as being key to the capture of Snake Island. On April 14, 2022, Ukraine pinpointed the Moskva's position. It launched a pair of Ukrainian-built Neptune missiles at the Black Sea Fleet's flagship, destroying it thanks to one of those missiles hitting the Moskva's ammunition stores. Ukraine had proven a point. It didn't need a navy to contend with Russia in the Black Sea. Ukraine just needed missiles and, as we'd later find out, a fleet of shipborne drones. Fast forward to when The Conversation published its article and Ukraine had taken out 26 vessels in the Black Sea Fleet, with intelligent targeted strikes that didn't require the country to deploy a single traditional ship. By February 2025, the UK's Ministry of Defence felt confident enough in Ukraine's ability to counter the Black Sea Fleet that it published a report noting just how badly that fleet had been degraded since Putin launched his full-scale invasion. As a result of Ukraine's bombardment, the UK Defence Journal states the report is claiming Russia's Black Sea Fleet has been forced to move all of its major assets from its historic base in Sevastopol to Novorossiysk in the eastern Black Sea. Russian units operating in the region have also been forced to adapt their tactics and change the areas in which they operate. The fleet still has the ability to conduct long-range missile strikes against Ukraine, but that was all. No more supply runs, no more control over the Black Sea. The naval dominance Putin expected to exert against his enemy had disappeared, just like the 26 ships that Ukraine destroyed with its drones and missiles, or perhaps as accurately, just like the rest of the fleet that ended up escaping the Black Sea just to ensure that Ukraine wouldn't be able to hit it anymore. By August 2024, Legion magazine was reporting that the last of Russia's Black Sea Fleet had left its position at the Crimean base of Sevastopol, marking the official exit of the fleet from the Black Sea conflict. The Atlantic Council said that the retreat not only showcased Russia's naval weakness, but also made a mockery of Putin's many threats to escalate the war if his enemies, be they Ukraine or the West, crossed his much-vaunted red lines. Ukraine had used missiles, including UK Storm Shadows, to hit the Black Sea Fleet. Putin hadn't responded with anything like the escalation he claimed would follow such an event. It had often been suggested that a cornered and beaten Vladimir Putin could potentially resort to the most extreme measures, including the use of nuclear weapons, the Atlantic Council says. In fact, he has responded to the humiliating defeat of the Black Sea Fleet by quietly ordering his remaining ships to retreat. In the context of Russia's Navy Day parade, the Black Sea Fleet wasn't going to be present. Couldn't be, even if Putin were foolish enough to want to have them there. Turkey controls the straits that link the Black Sea to the wider world, and it's not letting any military ships in or out, which is why Putin hasn't been able to replenish the fleet. But it's not participation that matters. It's what the utter failure of the Black Sea represents in the context of the Navy Day parade. For 3 years, Ukraine has proven time and time again that Russia's ships are vulnerable. They can be taken out by both missiles and drones. And while the former may have had a hard time reaching St. Petersburg, Ukraine's seaborne drones, combined with aerial long-range drones, could have taken out other Russian Navy Day ships, just as they have so many in the Black Sea Fleet. Why? Because Russia's navy is little more than a paper tiger. On paper, that navy looks strong. Global Firepower, which ranks 145 of the world's nations based on their military power, says that the Russian Navy is the world's third largest in terms of total asset size and tonnage, with 419 ships capable of displacing over 1.2 million tons. Russia has 10 destroyers, 12 frigates, 83 corvettes, and a fleet of 63 submarines to go along with dozens of patrol vessels and mine warfare ships. It even has an aircraft carrier. The problem is that the numbers don't mean much when you look at the reality of the Russian Navy. In January, 1945 published an article claiming that Russia's navy was slowly sinking into the abyss, and it's not wrong. The massive losses Russia has experienced in the Black Sea are just the start of Putin's naval problems. A combination of sanctions, corruption, and incompetence has left Russia with limited shipbuilding and maintenance capacity. Russia's navy, inclusive and outside of the Black Sea Fleet, leans far too much into the legacy side of things rather than delivering the sort of modern capabilities that a navy the size of Russia's should be able to deliver. Russia even has a problem with its ports, 1945 says. The country has access to only a limited number of all-weather ports, which leads to Russia's navy being segmented to the point where its ships can't support one another adequately. And if you need any evidence of the creaking nature of the Russian navy, you need only look at its sole aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov. 1945 reports that the current condition of this ship, which entered service over 3 decades ago, is dire to the point where it's been out of service since 2018 as it undergoes repairs and maintenance. That work hasn't gone anywhere. On July 14th, Marine Insight reported that Russia is on the verge of scrapping its aircraft carrier because it simply isn't able to make the massive ship seaworthy enough to be a useful asset to its navy. Think about what all of these problems mean in the context of the Navy Day parade. Let's say that Russia ignored all of the very legitimate security concerns that stem from Ukraine's success in the Black Sea and its July 27th drone assault on Leningrad. Even with those factors out of play, the 9th edition of Putin's Navy Day parade would have featured aging ships that simply aren't good enough to showcase Russia as a modern-day naval force. Putin would have acted like the ships were the best the world has to offer. That's the messaging that will be broadcast to the Russian people. But the reality of those ships representing the slow collapse of the Russian Navy would have been evident to anybody who was really paying attention. That would have been another level of humiliation beyond Ukraine launching an attack on the parade for Putin. Perhaps the state of Russia's navy would have been reason enough to cancel the parade, even without the security threat. We'll never know. So we're left with one more question to answer. What does the future of the naval aspect of the Ukraine war look like? In the Black Sea, it doesn't look like Russia is going to be able to reverse the situation it finds itself in anytime soon. It can't get any more ships into the sea thanks to Turkey, and there are no signs of Putin wanting to risk losing more of the fleet to Ukraine's drones and missiles. By March of this year, we were at the point where Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky was telling the world that Ukraine has the Black Sea situation under control. DW reports Ukraine's president is saying they, the Russians, have not controlled the Black Sea corridor for a long time. We are fighting for it because it is a step toward ending the war. We control the situation in the Black Sea. Ukraine won't take its eye off the ball when it comes to the Black Sea. It'll still hit any ships that Putin is foolish enough to send into the waterway. However, the military aspect of the naval battle is all but over. Ukraine can't hit any of Russia's ships further afield, and Putin isn't sending any more vessels into the Black Sea. Instead, Ukraine is concentrating on another aspect of the naval battle, Russia's Shadow Fleet. Putin created the Russian Shadow Fleet to circumvent the sanctions placed against Russia by many countries in the wake of his Ukraine invasion. That fleet was estimated to contain over 780 ships as of May 2024, the Atlantic Council reports shipbroker BRS is claiming. And Putin uses those vessels to transport oil to countries like China. That Shadow Fleet goes to great lengths to hide its presence in the world's seas and oceans, flying under the flags of nations other than Russia and using a variety of techniques to hide away from any organizations that track global shipping. That fleet has been an economic lifeline for Russia in much the same way as Ukraine's grain exports through the Black Sea. And now, Ukraine is hitting the Shadow Fleet, allegedly. Several of Russia's Shadow Fleet ships have been taken out over the last few months, The Telegraph reported on July 9th. One of the most recent, and the sixth in 2025 alone, was the Eco Wizard, which was stationed in the Russian port of Ust-Luga. On July 6th, a pair of explosions ripped through that ship, destroying its engine room and making it practically worthless to Russia. Therein lies Ukraine's new naval strategy. With the Black Sea under control and the rest of Russia's ships out of reach, it's turned its attention to the Shadow Fleet that keeps money pouring into Putin's coffers. Putin can do nothing about that new strategy. And perhaps the fact that Putin can do nothing to stop this strategy, even with the massive military navy at his disposal, is the final nail in the coffin of a cancelled Navy Day parade that showcases just how far Russia's navy has fallen. It's not just a cancelled parade that Putin has to worry about on the naval front. The complete failure of the Black Sea Fleet may have helped to open the door for Ukraine to retake Crimea, despite all of the experts saying it wasn't possible. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show if you want more videos covering the latest developments in the Ukraine war.